How are y'all feeling about jQuery? It's pretty cool. No? Not good. Got a 5. Nice. 1, 5. Got some numbers. Yeah, we can do the fist of 5. Why not? Okay, or not. Forget it this time.
I'm still trying to confide in JavaScript.
Still trying to get...
That's the platform, right?
Yeah, no. JavaScript's the base language, right? And jQuery is just a library on top. So if you don't understand JavaScript totally, jQuery is way harder to get than ever. And most of us don't understand JavaScript completely at this point. That's to be expected. We've been thrust into it pretty quickly. You know, it's been real tough, obviously, and I think it was I guess sadistically funny to see how after week 2, you know, everyone's like, yeah, you know, I'm starting to get this, right? So some of the CSS is hard, but like I'm getting it. And then we get into JavaScript, everyone's like, whoa, totally different, right? So I feel bad for you. I was there. I've done it. I learned, like a lot of you, kind of on my own, a little bit of help from some weirdo. Am I recording? I think I hit the recording button. Yeah, I am. Good call. Thank you. Yes, I'm recording. So the streamers out there can see the recording later if they want to. Y'all can see the recording later. So I upped the quality of the recordings. So if you go back and watch them later, they should be pretty good now. At least that's what Tony said. So you can blame him if it's not the case. Not me. Don't blame me.
It was like 640 feet.
Yeah, it was pretty low before because I was intentionally cutting down the quality, so it was easier to upload and easier to download. But now the downloads are like 4 gigs, so they're pretty good quality. Yeah, so you should be able to see everything real clear, hear me real well. And if you can't, you know, I'll try to make some tweaks. But anyway, jQuery. We're going to talk a little bit more about jQuery today, and a little bit more about theory behind JavaScript. So first half of the class is really heavy on some jQuery exercises. We'll have one quick one, and then we'll have one real long one. And like I said, with the last big exercise, I'm going to try to give you steps every few minutes to kind of help you keep going so we're not just lost on this last exercise because it's big. Then we'll take a break, talk a little bit about the exercise, and then we're going to learn some more theoretical kind of computer sciencey stuff about JavaScript, right? So real programming stuff about scoping and how scoping works with functions and variables and all that fun stuff, right? So we'll get to that. We'll try to learn it. I don't expect anyone to come away with a really good understanding of scoping by the end of today, but that's okay. It's a tough subject, and it's kind of hard to wrap your head around. So remember, it is important to note that when you're sitting here and you're frustrated and you know, you're like Trevor and you come up to me and you're like, look, dude, I read your examples and they make sense and I go try to put them on paper and I have to try and try again before I really get it. Like, that's cool. That's what's going to happen. And he's getting better. He may not feel like it, but he is. And you're all learning a lot. While you're really frustrated and while this feels overwhelming, is because you're learning so much, it's hard to keep up, right? And you actually are learning it, despite what you may think. Now, one of the big things that seems to be holding people up a lot is the syntax, right? So as we get more into JavaScript, the syntax will become more familiar. You won't have to think about it as much. It'll just kind of become natural. That'll definitely happen. Trust me on that. But yeah, it's overwhelming, right? And it's those periods of frustration that lend themselves well to how much you're learning. And then the TAs, myself, we can all see how much you're learning and how far you've progressed already. I mean, for pretty much all of us, HTML is a breeze now, right? Like, you think back to the first 2 weeks, it was pretty tough to try to remember how to do all the tags, what all the attributes meant, the CSS, but frankly, people seem to be pretty much past that. Yeah, okay, CSS throws us a curveball from now and then. It's not fun. No one likes CSS, I don't think. I don't. But, you know, we've got it.
I'm still having a hard time getting the borders to do what I want them to and Bootstrap.
Yeah, so that'll never change.
Okay.
I still have the same
Sounds
problem.
good.
Yeah, you've learned it, you've mastered it. CSS, like I said, is my least favorite thing because, you know, putting together some borders and trying to make them look good even with Bootstrap isn't as easy as it sounds, right? So Bootstrap helps because it lets us use a layout, but...
I did okay in CSS. It's Bootstrap that's really good.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's what I would recommend, that if there is something that you want to talk about or something you're struggling with, ask one of us before class, and we can go over it and see if it's just a little understanding that we could fill in, or if it's just because CSS and stuff is hard. So dealing with this stuff is hard, and it's hard to keep track of it well, especially as your HTML grows and your project gets larger. Keeping this stuff clean and easy to maintain is hard. One thing we haven't talked about in class that I always remember at the beginning of class and always forget to mention is your formatting. The number one thing people look for when you start working with them, the number one thing that makes your code readable and easy to maintain is your formatting. Make sure you're using good formatting. Download extensions for VS Code like Prettier and Beautify and stuff like that. They can do for you if you really want them to, because even when you're going through and debugging your problems and it turns out that it's a weird, syntax error, you forgot a curly brace, you forgot a parenthesis or something, if you use a formatter or you have good formatting, it's easier to find those problems and fix them. Because a lot of times you guys do understand the logic and you get almost there and then there's some weird syntax error that stops you because, hey, I forgot where this curly brace goes, and it's super hard to find when you've written everything out and you've got, 30, 40 lines of code and you're like, well, where does this one curly brace go? I don't know. So keep your formatting in check too. Try to be really diligent about that, and we can talk about that as we have time, like how should we format such and such. Pay attention to the examples and like how I write code too, because I try to use good format for the most part. So that's another thing that'll make this easier. The syntax is hard, right? So anyway, we're here to help. One-on-ones before class and after class. Take advantage of them. Monday, literally no one stayed, right? And no one left Monday saying I'm super confident in my jQuery. So pretty much every single one of you could have stayed a little bit longer, and we could have talked more. Now, I get it. At the end of the class, we're all tired. I'm tired too, and when you leave, I'm like, okay, great, I get to go home. I'm not going to lie. But it doesn't mean I'm not here to help you if you want to stay. It doesn't mean I'm not willing or I'm not excited to do that. All of us are, right? That's what we're here for. So coming in and before class starts, if staying after is too hard because we're all tired, we have work, we have kids or whatever, right? Just try to take advantage of us before class as much as you can, and try to hit up your peers on Slack and try to hit up a tutor if you need to, or try to meet up at a coffee shop down the street before class real early if you get out of work or whatever. Try to meet up on the weekends, just take advantage of each other and ourselves and, us instructional staff to really help you power through the tough parts. Yeah, so we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff today. We're going to play a Captain Planet game. That's what that weird noise was. There's like some sound to it, and it scared me. It was really loud. We're going to practice some more jQuery, and we're going to learn about scoping. Like I said, it says pretend to learn scoping. That's pretty accurate. And then we're going to talk some more about some click events, play some more jQuery games, right? And try to really just cement that understanding so that Saturday we can go a little bit further. Any questions on anything we've done so far with jQuery, with JavaScript, anything anyone wants to talk about before we really get chugging today? Nope. Okay. Well, why don't I show you what we're about to do. We're going to make a sweet Captain Planet game. You get a lot of, so don't be intimidated by what you see. You get a lot of the assets up front. So a lot of this work's done for you already. And the instructions say explicitly to play the theme. She's so loud.
Wind, water.
Anyone watch the show?
Oh, I did.
Yeah, Captain Planet. It's really weird. Isn't Don Cheadle like Captain Planet or something? Dude, it's probably a good show then. Yeah. So Captain Planet, we're going to be making a game like this where you can grow, you can shrink, you can make him normal size. He's got all kinds of powers, right? That you can use to make Captain Planet even more powerful or something. Move him around, say go planet, whatever. So, a lot of this stuff we already have, we're going to give to you. What your job is going to be is to give him a new power. A power like one of these that doesn't exist yet in the example that you get. That's exciting. You know, maybe have him make some fire or something appear on the screen, or duplicate himself, or, you know, get crazy sizes. I don't know. Do something weird that's different, right? You're going to need to take advantage of click events and manipulating the DOM elements around Captain Planet somehow to make him unique. Now, to start the activity, we're going to do some pseudocode for a few moments. So what I want you to do is to try to pseudocode your solution for your new power. So come up with your power, think about how things are laid out on the screen already. You know, what kind of buttons we've got, how the buttons react, stuff like that. And think about what you're going to have to do to make that power come to fruition for Captain Planet. So say you're going to have some fire appear on the screen. Well, you're going to need a button. You're going to need to click the button. When you click the button, you're probably going to have to add an image of fire or something, right? So pseudocode it out as best you can. Try to be explicit, come up with all the concrete steps, maybe draw it out if you want to kind of help you. It doesn't necessarily have to be words, right? But let's spend a few moments doing that. We'll go over it a bit, see if everyone's got a game plan, and we'll try to hit the ground running, okay? We're going to share these, some of us, after we're done too, so come up with some good ones. Yes. Do you have the GitLab clone to your machine? What was that? Yeah. That's where we get the homework from. So if you've got all of week 4, then you should be okay. Because we all go out to the GitLab repo to get our activities.
No.
So the audio file, we're not supposed to be.
Yeah, I noticed after that.
You'll
The binary.
yeah, you don't have to open that. You'll get all that stuff like in the assets folder, right? With the Captain Planet
I
game.
got the same exact message back in the pre-work. When I first was working on Visual Code, I didn't know.
Yeah, you don't need
I
to
even
open
submitted
the
a ticket
file.
in, and they just said, "Oh, don't worry about it." I'm like, what do you mean don't worry? I can't even like look at the code or anything.
Yeah, so for the audio files, don't open them. You won't be able to see anything.
Okay.
That's just how binaries work. Y'all feeling good about your pseudocoded solutions? Getting there? Spend like another minute on it, and then I want to hear some of them. Alright, so those of you that are streaming, why don't you slack some of your pseudocode if you wrote it down, some of your examples. Who here wants to share their power and how they pseudocoded it? And if no one is willing to share, I'll pick someone pretty soon. Cool, Jay, what's your power?
Maybe like change the color.
Change the color, Captain Planet? Nice.
Yeah.
How's it gonna work then?
That was a part besides adding a button.
Okay, so you gotta add a button. That's a good first step. What do we gotta do to the button? Click it.
Right?
Yeah.
That worked.
So the user's gonna have to click it.
Yeah.
When we click that button, what's gonna happen in your JavaScript? So we're changing the color of Captain Planet, okay?
Okay.
So it's an image, but we could probably change the background color,
It's gotta be it. Okay.
right? Or we could get another
Maybe a
image.
different image, yeah.
We could get a different image.
Right.
Would work, okay. So you're gonna have to do what?
Find a different image or whatever.
Find a different image, okay. So say you have the image in your assets folder already. You're gonna have to maybe find the HTML element that has the Captain Planet image in it,
Okay.
right? So in JavaScript you can do that. We know how to do that with jQuery and JavaScript. Then what do you gotta do? Maybe change the source attribute or something, right?
Right.
To the new image,
Right.
okay.
Inside that button, see that.
Inside the button, yeah.
Right.
What else? Is that it? Does that do it? What if he's already the second color? You want to bring it back to the first color? Maybe you can switch between the colors? Maybe?
Like
So-
a timer, so it'll switch back anyways after like 5 seconds.
You could do a timer if you want to do it. Yeah, you could do a timer and have him just change back. Yeah, anyway, those are all awesome, man. That's exactly how you could pseudocode that solution. Anyone else want to share? Yeah? Spin? Nice. Like 360 degrees? All the way around, yeah. Okay, so how do you do that?
start with adding like another title and a row of buttons.
Okay, yeah.
And I figured one button would be to the left and the one to the right.
Nice. I like that.
Only 15 degrees for button stuff.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah. Great. Paula, you want to share too?
Yeah, I was gonna just make them duplicate themselves.
Okay. Nice. So click the button, duplicate. So again, we're gonna have to use the JavaScript to probably grab some stuff, copy it or something like that, right? Cool. Yeah, those are all good examples of pseudocoding, right? So basically what we want to do is talk our way through that solution, kind of write down how we would solve it, because if you start thinking about it, it might make it easier. It might not, but it might make it easier once you actually get to the code to know where to go, right? Because you can think about that problem like you would in normal natural language. I have a button. Well, I have to click on it. Okay, that's one. Then I have to grab the image. Then I have to spin the image. Then I have to change the color, right? And then you kind of can walk your way through that solution somewhat, and they can at least lead you down the right path of how you need to Google this if you don't know off the top of your head. So yeah, those are all really great. Thanks for sharing. So why don't I pull up this? So say I was going to pseudocode out a solution right now, and I wanted to, for instance, create fire or water. So how could I write that? Well, I need a new button. So what? Yeah, you create the HTML first. Nice, that's right. So I need a new button, right? In HTML, GTML. It's even better. And then what? I'm gonna need to probably handle a user click with, let's just do jQuery for now, right? And then I'm probably going to have to create a new image tag, add the source to the fire image, append the fire image to the Captain Planet div, and I mean that's effectively it, right? There's so pseudocode can look a bunch of different ways. Like you don't have to necessarily do it the way I just did it, where I just wrote it out literally in a list of steps. The slides have an example too. If I can find the slides, that we can look at of how you could potentially pseudocode, right? And so it's similar. It's a list, an initial HTML layout using maybe Bootstrap, right? Theirs has different details in mind. You're using jQuery. We're going to go ahead and add the buttons and images, and we're going to add some click handlers. We need to use our $ parentheses, right? That's always where we start. And then we're going to go ahead and change some CSS or something, right? So you could also use boxes or a flowchart or whatever if you want to do your pseudocode. But the important thing about the pseudocode is basically that if you do it, it's going to help you walk through that solution, right? So I know we haven't talked about it too much, pseudocoding, and we actually haven't for probably weeks pseudocoded anything really. But it's something to keep in mind every time you approach a new problem. How can I solve it? Well, let's just break it down really quick, you know, in my head in some steps, and it will help you. Whether you write it out on paper or not, thinking about the problem, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to spend a few minutes trying to make this beast right here. It's exercise number 10. Give you about 10-15 minutes or so. What you need to do, now you have the HTML, you have the assets for the song, you have the image of Captain Planet. You need to find a way to add a new button or something, some control, right, that allows the user to interact with Captain Planet and make something happen. Give them this new power, okay? So remember, you're going to need jQuery. You're going to need click handlers. You're going to need to manipulate some CSS probably. All of those things are going to come into play right now. And what I want is when you're done, Slack an image of, you know, if you can get your power, if it's not something that happens really quick, if you can get it on Slack out an image of it, or share something that you've done to make this power work, okay? So 10-15 minutes. Go ahead and try to do it in You're gonna be on your own on this one. Okay? Yeah, no, that was examples of extra powers. So you have most of the stuff, but yeah, it's not quite the same as the one I showed. So I'll open that up and show you. Oh, mine are the same. Alright, well I had a new power. And while you're working, I will try to do the same. What was that? Yeah, if they don't do anything, you could cheat and use those, right? Cut some corners, get it done faster. Being efficient, yes, there's a better way to put it. There's no cheating in the professional world, I guess, unless you're stealing someone else's stuff. Well, the thing is, if you write it all, you're gonna get more familiar with the syntax and like how to do it, right? And if you copy, yeah, no, not yet. You will eventually. You'll be surprised. Alright, we'll do this for a few more moments. I'm trying to add my own power here. What was that in?
I'm just trying to figure it out myself, but is there no kind of like rotator trying to flip it?
Oh, so CSS properties. You can rotate images 90 degrees at a time. So I would people how to rotate an image with CSS
Oh, okay.
and then use
I
that.
just can't really put that into a button.
Yeah, you can. There's CSS transitions. So what you do is you change the CSS. You can tell it to rotate 360 degrees and have it transition, and have it take like 2 seconds or whatever, and it moves it all around. So you totally can. And then you just take the CSS class away, and you're done. It's not easy, but you can do it.
I'm not gonna do it in this section.
You got it, Jay? You got it? Yeah, man, you got it.
Figure out how to add a button.
In HTML?
Yeah. Well, no, like add the button and what it was. Wasn't sure what I think.
Yeah, that was tough figuring out what to do. Mine was really stupid. I just picked something quick.
So like, I was trying to find another guitar one. There isn't. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so I just I picked up. So I think they're all like the same color. You know what I mean? Like, or like a final stitch up. Or I think they're all not even the same like forces. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So kind of like
Inverted Captain Planet.
it's all like in black things, but like black and white. Oh my god.
Nice. Peyton's got his out there where he grows a beard. Nice, man. I like it. So, how are we feeling on that one? Fist 5. What do we got? How many people finished and got a nice solution? Okay. That was a tough one. That was a tough one. What?
Yeah, I can add a button, fire and not fire,
Triggering it? Okay. To like, what was your power? To add fire? Okay. Yeah. So, I'll show you kind of what I did. And it didn't add an image. But what it did was, I would just, every time I'd click a button, I would add the text, ha 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 ha, and really disgusting text over the image. Which is close to what you were trying to do, right? You wanted to create an image tag. Yeah, I will. I just want to show you how it works. So you click it, right? You can see, ha ha ha, just however many times. It's nothing super exciting, but what I did is I added a new button, right? Kind of like Peyton did. I took advantage of the on click, and I literally just raw text, man, injected it in. Now, what else could I have done? Could have created a p tag, right? How would I create a p tag, Nor? What was that? So remember, with jQuery, we always start with our $, right? That's not it. That's not a P. Now remember, when we create with jQuery, we have to put it in the angle brackets to make sure that it knows we're making a new one. We take P tag, and we could actually wrap it like this in jQuery, and we can call the attribute. Actually, I don't think we need the jQuery calls because we created with jQuery. We can call .attribute, right? And we can set the style equal to my crazy text here. Okay. And we can change the text to hee hee hee, even worse. Hee 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 hee. And then we can do after. And I cannot type today or any day. Can inject our p tag, right? So for yours, it'd be very similar. What would we put here instead of a p tag? An image tag, right? And what could we put here instead of style? Source. Nice, yeah. And then you could put the URL of the source, right? And you wouldn't need the text. And then you can just do an after and put it right after or before or something, right? You could wrap it all in a div. So there weren't too different, our solutions, right? So remember, jQuery, you're going to create something, use your $. Well, with everything, use your $. You can wrap everything in the $, really, and it just becomes jQuery. Attributes, don't forget the jQuery functions that you get. So if you ever forget what you can possibly do with jQuery, you can revisit the API website, if I can open it up really quick. You can revisit the API website, and here you can see all the different functions you could possibly need for manipulating your DOM with jQuery, right? Is there anyone else who had a potential solution that they want to share or that they could post in Slack? We've got Peyton's there. Did anyone else get close or have an idea? Yeah, Matt?
For the clone, I wanted to just clone the image already there. So
Okay.
what I do dot clone in the jQuery and then that image and then function.
Well, let's see. Is there a clone function? There's a clone function. Nice. So why don't we go ahead and take Captain Planet. We already have the Captain Planet right here. See what it does. Oh my gosh. Oh man, it didn't work. Okay, apparently it's not that simple. But if you do something like this, so I like where you're thinking. Why doesn't this work? I don't know. I literally don't. You can always console log, see what you're getting back, and you can see if it looks familiar to the stuff we're working with. Okay, so we come back here, we look at our console, and we have a weird jQuery object. It says it's image Captain Planet. Let's check out our elements. We have our container. We have two of them. They must be sitting literally on top of each other. Yeah, they're position absolute. So there are two. Actually, it does work. Nice. But we can't see it. So if I change, so I can take style. Let's take our clone captain dot style. I think we can just pull the style out, or we can do style, right? And then we can do style plus equals. And let's see if this overwrites the other position. So what I'm trying to do is we have a position fixed to that image, so they're in the same place. Top 50, right? I'm going to basically... No, it didn't work. Oh well. Anyway, we're most of the way there. If you change the CSS a little bit, you can see there's the second one, right? So, required a little bit more tweaks. Maybe we can make the picture bigger or something like that, right? And you could have seen both. So, let's say go about doing it. Anything else on this that was really stumping people? Like, I know we're all still kind of stuck on jQuery and exactly how to use it, and this is our refresher for the day. Jay?
Put it where it'd be like, if you pick a whole screen, it's going to take over whatever the button said, like take over, and then take up the entire screen.
Could you have it take over the whole screen? So, like, we could make the style position absolute top 0, left 0, height 1000 pixels, width 1000 pixels. Oh, that's 100. Alright, so I set the position absolute, the top left, the top and left both 0, and then the height and the width to 1000. So, let's see what it does. Nice. So it didn't take over the whole screen because it's in a relative parent, right? If we remember positioning. But it took over all of that and covered the other Captain Planet. Yeah, but isn't the parent container relative, so it can't escape it or something?
I don't know, but the image is already absolute.
Right. Yeah, so the positioning's weird, and so it makes it hard to move it around that much. A lot harder than it should have been. But, yeah. You can do it. So, jQuery. Still kind of a pain. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's still hard, I know. So, what else can we talk about with jQuery? Let's recap jQuery a little bit. What is something else that people want to see again with jQuery right now? Let's take like 10 minutes and just cover jQuery some more. Or JavaScript, or anything. Matt, yeah.
The thing that you went over, I guess, Monday, the math.org and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
Random number generators.
Uh-huh. So, specifically the random number stuff, or like some of the jQuery associated with it? Because let's talk about the jQuery.
Yeah.
So I can show you, here's the code, the unsolved example. where we wanted to take a random number and put it right here in this random number, right? So what we had is a random number button that we needed to click, okay? So again, first thing we need to do is we'll just do this exercise again so that we can get a little bit more jQuery under our belts before we move on, because we're about to do a lot of stuff with button clicks, manipulating buttons, generating stuff randomly, so this is actually a really good example. I'm glad you brought it up. Okay, so jQuery, starting from scratch. If I want to get a button so I can add a click handler to it, what do I have to do? $sign parentheses, exactly, that's where we start. So I have a button, random button, that's the ID. What do I put? Pound, hashtag, random button, right? Because it's the ID of this button. Andy, how do we add a click handler?
On.
On?
Parentheses. Go to click.
Click.
And then dot.
A dot after? What do we do?
I'm not so sure about the dot.
So, we have the on click, so nice, that's exactly right. And then we have to add a function in there to handle the click.
Right.
Right? So, the thing to remember here is, whenever you do a dot on, you have two parameters. You have the name of the event that you want to hook onto, and then you have a function that does the thing you want it to do. Okay? Don't get too worried about how this function works right now. We'll talk more about anonymous functions and stuff a little bit later. But just know that you need a function here. Okay? Always. Always. Otherwise it doesn't do anything. There's no function, right? So we need to generate a random number. That's when we can get into our math.floor. And I don't expect you to remember this. So we're going to pick a number between 1 and 10, or 1 and 9 in this case. So we just do the math.floor, math.random algorithm that they give us, no problem. So what it does is this generates a number between 0 and 0.9999999 something. Crazy, right? You can times it by 9, so you get a number between 0 and 9.99999 something. Math.floor rounds it down to the nearest number. So if it's 0.1, it'll go down to 0. If it's 9.1, it'll go down to 9, right? Oh, actually, this will be 8.999, right? Because it never goes to 1. And then, so after the math floor, we're going to have somewhere between 0 and 8. And then we add 1 to it, and that's how we get 1 to 9. Okay, so that's how the math random stuff works. So, next thing we want to do is using jQuery, we want to inject into this random number h1 tag that we have, this number that we have created. Okay? How do we do that? $sign, I heard $sign. $sign parentheses is always where we start. Every single time. Heather, what do we do next? It's called random number. So we need to do another selector, right? Because we need to get the element that we want to inject text into. And this one has an ID of random number. Our octoscope, yeah. Random number. jQuery. If we weren't using jQuery, what could we use? Or if you know the jQuery function we can call right now to change the text. What do we have to do to change the text here? So we could set text content if we were doing with JavaScript, or with jQuery we can just call text. What about prepend? It's a good question. What about prepend? We could technically use it, yeah. So what prepend does is takes HTML and injects it into the parent element that you're specifying first, as the first child element. Since it is it's an empty element right now, if we use prepend, it would prepend the text in. And that's all well and good, but if you added a new random number and you kept clicking, it wouldn't overwrite it. So the reason why we're using text now is so we can overwrite it. So let's see what this does. prints our random number every time between 1 and 9. Why don't we try to see what's going on here? How do we see what's going on? We use our friend, the console log. Let's add some in, see what's going on. Let's get our random number. The number will be, and add a random. All right. What's the first thing we're going to see, Trevor, when I open this console? Are we going to see anything console logged out? Document is ready. So document ready will fire as soon as the document's done loading. So what that says is once the HTML is all done rendering, we can call this document.ready function. It's not super important you know what it does. It's just a good thing to know. In jQuery, we wrap all of our code in it, because we want all the HTML to exist before we try to manipulate it, right? So the document is ready. Great. When I click the button, Jose, what am I going to see? What was that? You're going to see the number, and we're going to see something else too. We're going to see, we click the button, right? So we see we click the button, and the number will be 1. And if I scroll on down, the number is indeed 1. So by doing this, by console logging inside the button click, I can start to get a feel of when this function right here is called. This function is called every time I click, right? And that's why we need it. If we weren't to have that function there, nothing would happen, literally. This example from Monday making a little bit more sense today since we've seen more, feeling about the same? Anyone got any feedback on this? Is anyone feeling more confident with jQuery?
Since I started at 0, half a point's got to be better than 0.
Exactly, it is. A half a point is better than 0. And yeah, it is. And the thing is that half a point is relative, right? So half a point of what? It could be a lot of points, right?
I do have one question though. With the math out random, if you're trying to get a number between 1 and 0 and 9, why not just multiply it by 10 instead of adding plus 1? Because it'll never get to 10, right? So it's still giving you 0 to 9. Right?
Yeah. So if I just multiply it by 10, it'd give me 0 to 9, but I'm trying to get between 1 and 9. Yeah. So yeah, you're exactly right. I could do that. So the example when we did it Monday, we just did between 0 and 9. Yeah, so it was different. Nice. So when I say we're going to do something, yeah, question? Yeah, really quick. We'll see. Let me see. How are we on time? When are we supposed to start? When were we supposed to start the next exercise? So I don't have time to show another example after this one because we're already going to be about 10 minutes behind. But during the break or after class, I can show more. Anyway, when I say we're going to do something with jQuery, what we all need to remember first and foremost is we need a $sign. That's it. Like, start there. Start with the $sign. If you don't know what to do or where to go, start with the $sign in the parentheses. Literally, start there. Inside that $sign in parentheses, it's a good place to go with some quotes. Double quotes or single quotes doesn't matter. If you're grabbing something, that's what you're going to need. If you already have something, you may not, but odds are you don't because we're just starting, right? So you're going to need your quotes, and then remember your CSS selectors. Use your CSS selectors to grab stuff. We're going to be grabbing a lot of things with jQuery. That's its primary purpose is to grab things easily. And then you can, after grabbing it, do all kinds of stuff. In this case, we're going to do our onClick handler, right? So we call the on function, very generic. We tell it what event we're hooking onto, and we give it something to do. That's what this function is. It's the thing to do, right? And that's relatively the gist of jQuery, which sounds super simple, I know, when I say it like that, but it's not. There's a lot of syntax here. I mean, we can all see it. Even though it's like, oh, just start with the $sign and just use some quotes and just do the CSS selector, like I've already said 3 things. and then, oh, just do a dot, and oh, just call this, right? But there's a ton of syntax going on here, and I really think that the hardest thing to comprehend right now is how all this is working when you're still trying to totally get the syntax, right? The feel of the syntax. So, like I said earlier, like you may only feel like you have a half a point more, right? But that half a point means a lot, because that half a point's going to take you a lot farther. And every time you get a point, a half a point or whatever, it's easier to go back and look at that same stuff and understand what's happening, right? So you build that foundation, and you can keep moving forward. I know this stuff is really hard, guys, so I appreciate everyone hanging in there. Cool. So we need to start the next example, or the next exercise, which is a big one. It's exercise number 11, the fridge game. I'm going to go ahead and show you real quick what it looks like. Dang it, I'm in the wrong one. Let me just pull it up. Fridge game, so... This one, you're more than welcome to do it with partners, because it's a big one. Okay. So, we have a fridge. And we can click on letters and add them to the fridge like magnets. You can clear it, underscore, dashes. Basically, we'll have this image, and we want to be able to spell stuff out on the fridge, you know, kind of like you do with the tiles that, you know, kids play with and stuff on the fridge. But there's a lot of moving parts to this. We have an image, right? So we're going to have to position that image, figure out how to get it there with CSS and stuff, just your traditional JavaScript with Bootstrap. We have to have our jQuery. So we got to make sure that we include our jQuery in our source tags, or our script tags, up in our head element, right? So you need that reference to the CDN. Then we obviously need a long list of letters and a dash or underscore or whatever that's rendering as. Looks like an underscore. So this might be an array, right? An array of letters or something along those lines. But either way, you have so many buttons, and you're going to have to create click handlers for every single one, aren't you? So we're going to have to use our jQuery to do click handlers. And when we do that, we're going to have to manipulate the DOM somehow to get these other images. I mean, they could just simply be divs with a border and some text, right? But we got to place them inside of the fridge, inside the bounds of the fridge. Then we got to have the ability to get rid of them all. So there's a lot of moving parts, okay? There are 28 buttons, 27 buttons on here, 28. It's 28 buttons. They're all going to need click handlers. We already know some ways to make that easy, right? I hope no one's thinking, oh, I'm going to have to do 28 different click handlers when there's a cool construct we can use to loop over something and do it all at once. We have, obviously, all of the alphabet, so maybe that's an array. Maybe it's a string. A string's an array, right? We have to create new elements with our jQuery. So remember, when you create an element, you need those angle brackets. Okay? So we're going to have to create new elements. We're going to have to append them to this fridge somehow, or prepend them, or something, right? We're going to have to have some way to put them on the fridge image. And then we have to know what they all are. We have to know what all these new elements are. Some way we have to be able to identify all of them. So when we clear, it's easy to grab them all and destroy them. So that jQuery API link that I slacked out earlier, you're going to need it, right? Because we're going to have to experiment and find some new functions. Do this in groups of 4 or something. It's activity number 11. After like 5-10 minutes, I'll start to give some hints, okay, of how we can move forward. And we'll be walking around helping you as much as we can, because it's going to be really hard. But we'll get through it together. I'm gonna Slack out that link to the jQuery API again, so it's there and first thing in Slack. So this exercise has 3 major tasks every 10 minutes. I'll give one, okay? So I'll give the first task to help you. Or at least I'll give you enough that you should be able to finish it. What I recommend you do is try to solve one task at a time, test it thoroughly, make sure it works, and then move on, okay? You can refresh your page to start anew. You don't have to worry about having a clear button. What's up, Michael?
Well, that's what I, so, when Tim started letting them know, yeah, I just don't know what the actual.
Yep, if you don't know what a function does, check out that API doc.
And if you're not sure, go back to the
So essentially you're taking that button each of the letters and you're assigning
Let's just agree with the letter, when you need to grab the jQuery is the actual
a letter
element in the HTML you want to modify.
to the button.
Like you need to scroll into your HTML portion of the file and find out what you're trying to add the button to. That make sense? And then you're gonna append, keep appending each of the buttons. That help?
Nice at the for loop. Okay. So, following the steps like that, one of the things is. Okay, so we need to look at the jQuery API docs. But I will tell you, all of this stuff in its first big task needs to be in the for loop. Or you can just write all your code in the for loop, so you don't have to worry too much about putting a bunch of code in this. Yep. Okay, nice. So, we're going to have to look at the jQuery documentation that's slacked out. What happens for function that can do this. Search, just type
Right, so like, if I pass that to the letter.
Yeah, letter button dot net.
there's a remove class, so probably an add class somewhere.
Like, I know that it passes.
So if we read that first definition of add class, it says one or more space-separated classes to be added to the class attribute for each matched element. So in this case, the matched element is the letter button, right? If you look down at the examples, there's like the jQuery selecting a P, add class, and then
Separated by the space.
Yep. So why don't we try that? Now remember, it's supposed to be for loop.
Letter button?
No.
Yeah, letter button already. Replace the $P with the letter button.
No. Okay, so what?
Oh.
Let's go.
Letter button dot add
So what's going on here? There's some HTML in there, and I'll go back to yours. And I'll get you to go to one of the one that we have already established. Right. So there's a button. And all the out of there.
Like it requires a value.
Do you need the jQuery $sign and the quotes and all that in this case? Okay.
Yeah, so you're inside of the folder. Right. So any duration of that folder,
Letter button?
right, you're gonna put that letter
Because letter button already is your
button.
jQuery.
You're gonna put letter button in here.
So you can do just letter button, not add class.
Right, so what it's gonna do is it's gonna
And then you can
each letter button
add classes, space separate.
So,
string.
dot add view and then
the next
it loads, whatever it's called.
yeah, so you're gonna do the letter button.
And then,
So you're basically gonna call the variable inside of here, and then
Now, check out the example there.
it's gonna all of the keywords.
Go ahead and do it.
So, but letters is only
Yeah, okay, so.
Right, letters is gonna be just an array.
So what you, oh, I see what you're
The actual value.
right here inside of these, you're.
The only thing that holds it is this one.
Yeah.
Why does it want? Yeah, here you're gonna grab that.
So right there you have 3 strings separated by space, right? Let's go back to the
Inside
example.
of the pen, you're gonna pick letter button.
What do they have?
Comma, letters, and then sort of.
I have a letter button. No, you don't.
Dot attribute, for example, there's a level data dot, so it's only variable you can call it. Letter,
Letter button.
the array. And then.
Well, the last thing, we need to do append the letter button to that button.
Yeah.
I will introduce you.
See how that works?
This one and the map
Remember that
one.
from? Yeah, so we're gonna use a for loop to. Letter button.
It's pretty close.
This one is data letter attribute. This one is a function, right? So remember when you use the attribute function, the first parameter of the function is the attribute changing, and then you do a comma. The second parameter is what you want that attribute to be. Why don't we look up actually the attribute function?
Yeah,
And then API drop.
Oh, yeah.
So you have that class there, go back to search.
Okay, now you got what? Okay, so then let's do this. Go back to now let's do a, can you use the component for both of those to inspect?
There might be an example of it. Can you scroll down? Anyway, it's got 2 parameters, right? So the first one is the one you're using, the one you're changing. So in this case, it's data letter. And then you'll comma, and then you'll put the value of the value of the letter, right? So that's how it's going to be.
So it's iterating properly, we know that.
We're gonna go over.
And letters of I, you're gonna actually just add it to the product.
What's up, Matt?
How do you make something easy? Then give each letter, button.
Uh-huh. Okay, so the first major task. Let's go over it as a class. So the first thing we need to do is create a for loop, right? What does I need to go till? Like, what's the condition here? Letters dot length. Nice. I heard a lot of people say that. For loops now are pretty easy, right? Compared to jQuery. Yeah? That's how it's going to work. The whole entire class. You're going to last week's materials cake, right? Not always, but... okay. So, create a variable. Name letter button equal to $button. Letter button equal to $. And then remember we have our angle brackets because what? We are creating a button, right? Now we need to add the following classes to the letter button. So if we go ahead and go to the doc and we were to search for the word class, now I already had it pulled up, but we could start looking at things that were related to classes, right? So I just searched for the word class. And you can see right away we have a remove class. I mean, we probably have an add class, and we do. So these are kind of hard to read. These docs are not that good. As Annie and I just found out, some of them are really bad. But if we read the first one here, it needs to type string, okay, so we know we're going to have the quotes somewhere in this. One or more space-separated classes to be added to the class attribute of each matched element. Alright, that's a mouthful. But if we scroll down a little bit, you can see an example. $p.add class, my class, your space, your class, okay? So right here in the add class function, we can see that there are two classes being added because when we have classes and we put a space between them, they're different classes, right? Remember our class attribute from HTML? So the only thing here that's tricky is what do we put instead of $p because we don't have p tags, right? We'll put the letter button. Nice. That variable. Why can we put that variable though? That seems weird. Well, remember that variable comes from our jQuery assignment. So remember we have the $parentheses always starts there. We always start there, and we are starting there. We just assigned the return value of that to a variable. So if I go ahead to letter button, add class. So I need to add letter, letter button, letter, and letter button color. Great. We have classes added. Space separated, right? Because that means we have multiple classes. That should work okay. Alright. So, next we need to give them an attribute called data letter with a value equal to letters index I. So let's go ahead and open it up again. And we all remember adder, right? But let's just search for attribute because we're adding an attribute. ATTR, who's that bad boy? But if you scroll down a little bit longer, now I didn't expect people to find this, but I'm going to show you. There's one called data. That's interesting. Data takes a key, a string naming the piece of data to set, and a value, anything. Takes in anything except undefined. Okay, that's interesting. Takes in data. Well, what does that do? It's going to create an arbitrary data attribute on a component. So look, we have the div, we have data, a test, and it takes in an object. If I view the page source, oh man, this is way harder to read. Dang. If I were to see the HTML, we'd have our data attribute. It'd be data-test with this encoded into it, this object. Okay, so let's see. This is what the data attribute looks like. And you can see to get to role, I just have to do .data and role. So instead of using the ATTR, which you could definitely use, we can also use data. So again, we still have our letter button, .data, and it's letter, because that's the key, right? And our value is letters I. Alright, You got that one done. Nice. Let's move on. What's the key?
Yeah, why is it letter?
Why is it letter? Because our attribute is going to look like this, right? So the key, because it's data, is letter, so it automatically adds data dash in front of it. And the value is letters I. You could also, for the same one, letter button dot attr data letter, and this is what Andy was trying to do, but the adder documentation is terrible. We saw. So these are both equivalent. One's a little shorter, but they both work. Okay, so now we need to set the text equal to. So we have our letter button. What is the function we can use to change text? Jesse? Text. Nice. Okay, well we need to set it to letters I. That's what it says to do. Finally, we need to append each letter button to the button's div. So where do we start? $sign to the letters div, or to the buttons div, which Octothorpe buttons. Then our fun append letter button. If I open this up, we got our letters. There you go. That's step 1. There's your code.
Yeah, ours are. I have that exact code and it's not.
Is there a syntax error? Check your console when you open it up. Yours isn't working either? I'll come look at it. Check your console, and also make sure that your buttons... Ooh, look at that. My buttons are missing something. They're missing their data letter attribute. So this might not actually work. Nope. There you go. So you actually do have to use ATTR. Stephanie's going to slack out the first completed task. Let's get started on the second one. Use that code. Try to compare it with what you have and see why it's not working. I'll leave it up on the screen as well. And does Chris or Stephanie, whenever you want to go see why theirs isn't working?
We're good.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah. Like my for loop is automated letters.
Got. Ah, so that's not working. Because one, you have letter button there spelled incorrectly. See how it's capital. Now see if it works.
Data did work. Why did you say the data didn't work?
It doesn't set, I guess. ATTR creates the attribute, and data apparently doesn't. Hit the refresh button. Refresh button. Go ahead and open the console. Let's see if there's an error. You can just extract it. Letter is not defined. Oh, I typed out something wrong. Okay. So we have letters.lang. Yeah, data letter. And we have to change it to the ATTR one because the data one didn't work like I thought it would. So we need this ATTR one, not the .data. And I know we're going way over time on this one. I want them to do more of this. We'll talk about scoping. Okay. Is there anything else more critical for the class? Okay, we'll cover that for sure. Have you created the click event and all that? So the buttons aren't quite done yet, so they shouldn't do anything if you click them. So part 2 is gonna get us there. We're gonna definitely cut the crystal example, and I'm gonna cut the review because we're gonna do it together.
Right.
Yeah. So that'll cut 20 minutes, which will still go past. So I'll probably just after this example, just do lexical scope for the rest of the class.
Okay.
And we'll just cover those examples, and we'll send out the brain teaser, and they can do it at home. You guys got it? You done? Making progress?
Did you grab the snippet of code off of the class?
Yeah, it still didn't show up.
Did you check your console for errors? Try to follow the steps the best you can.
The other thing too is have the other activities up and try to go back to them as well.
Yeah, reference your other activities because
Like on click, you know we've covered.
we've
right?
covered this
There's gotta
before,
be an
right?
example of it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, you know what, actually, that's done.
Sorry.
Step 2, I'm still on the task 1.
Okay.
It's like, the answer to it is right.
Yep.
Right.
Create a variable, go to a new div. Well, we created a new button there, right? Yeah. Yep. Set the following classes, those kinds of things. Yeah. So we've done some of this already in this example that you can work off of, right? How you doing, Heather? You finished test 2?
Oh yeah, I'm on 3 already.
Nice. Nice. Cool. What's up, Matt?
Live work.
What's up?
There's something going on with our Did you grab the snippet that I sent out? Or was it just a snippet? Yeah. Oh, okay. I just don't know where it's going. I'm still baby steps with regular classes, trying to run, and it's just like, I can't, and then when I put it shouting out, like, sometimes, like, you gotta be on your own. Yeah, that's my problem. Okay. I do find watching, I just get that whole part. And that's okay.
I don't know, dude. I gotta get something straight. Here we go. Let's go.
So, very close, very, very close. Yeah, like, I don't know, so if it's testing mostly is like speed of task 1, right? You just gotta get to the concept.
Create a new div, right?
Oh, okay, we parentheses. And then we left this right.
What else do you need? You need something before the parentheses.
Oh,
Start with jQuery.
oh, wait.
That's it, man. Nice. Don't forget, what was it? But if you want to do it for your letter, but remember, yeah, we have class like this. It's like them all at once. So those little things, what really sucks is there's so many times where I've seen where like government has the exact logic.
So, once you get line right? So once you
Right,
get
then
one
you're
click set up, you just put it up above.
But it tells you what
It's
line.
just gonna create a variable.
There's unfortunate little details that
I had a question for you.
The on-click event here, I keep getting the little red squiggly.
Keep getting what?
Little red squiggly. Oh,
You need another one there? Keep your frenzy and your curly brace. Are they matched up?
oh.
You get the curly brace here, and then you have frenzy, and then the curly brace. So you click those.
Yes.
Why did you need to click those? If you have an opening curly brace,
Why did they fix this?
if you didn't, I'll tell you why in a second too.
Okay.
You've already done everything else in that.
If you have an opening curly brace, the next thing that it needs to see that isn't just like lines of code is do the closing curly brace. You can't have like a closing parenthesis there, because that's breaking the block braces. Does that make sense? So if you open a parenthesis, you can't open curly braces or anything like that until you
So
close
it's like
the
whatever's
parentheses.
open first has to be closed first.
Yeah, they're pairs, right? So you need to pair them properly. And so what you had was,
And then just backwards, huh?
yeah, you had an open parenthesis, an open curly brace, a closing parenthesis, closing curly brace. So they didn't have their pair,
So
right?
the one that came, or the one that came after has to close first.
Yes. The last one has to close first before the next one closes. So
Okay, that makes.
now, look at your on-click function
Yes.
and tell me what's wrong with it. Pay attention to the very little details about it.
I'm missing a column.
There you go, man. Almost?
See, this makes sense. Oh, yeah. The style of the function of this stuff.
Yeah, you look at
Right, it auto, like I started here,
closing curly braces.
auto populated the first letter.
Before all of this is
There's probably a document,
Yeah, exactly. It only happened in my form, like inside the form, it didn't happen. It only happened when I was typing like less than the word over the whole spot.
It's gonna need to be after those letters, right? So
Oh, what the?
it's gonna be after that. You already have the array, so you're not gonna have to the jQuery question right there. See that code right there? Line 85 through 91. That's exactly what you're gonna need for this step, right? So if you look at these tasks, they lay out that. You want me to blow it up a little bit? So what I recommend you do, Jose. Oops. Is that easier to see?
Yeah.
So what I recommend you do is in that task 1, there's a list of like 1 through 6 steps. Read those steps and then read these lines of code and read them all together, right? As you're copying them and kind of see how they match up. See what they're saying and try to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing for each of those steps. Okay?
I did. I just had like a bunch.
Well, I sent it to
Get it? Gotta be close. No?
like the space that actually a value is a couple of years I recognized that I was like, knock out and go trying to go 3 steps. So I was trying to get it to like pop the space out
So, create a div tag. How do you create a button tag? Remember, you need the angle brackets in jQuery to say you're creating something.
Variable first magnet equals $,
Parentheses.
yeah. And then just close it. That's it. That's literally it. Inside.
Does that make sense? Why we're doing that? No, not really. No, it doesn't. It's just jQuery syntax. So it's just this is just very specific jQuery syntax.
I don't know why, but I do know that it's slightly easier for us to do that. But I don't know why.
Less to write
It seems a lot easier.
than doing like document.create element or whatever. Okay. So this is very jQuery specific. So there's not a rhyme or reason why it works this way. It's just the way jQuery did it.
Creating a button that is attached to the variable letter button. So then we're adding a class.
Yeah.
Letter button. And the attribute is the data letters inside the array. Text is whatever's in the array.
Yeah.
So then the buttons append. Oh, the buttons are attached to the variables.
The buttons are attached. They're in the variable. So this is a button. This represents a button, right? So we're adding classes to it. We're adding the data letter attribute. We're adding the letter as text, and then we're appending it to the buttons div. So there's a div with the ID buttons, and we're literally injecting this in the HTML. Yeah. So if you scroll up, there's a div right here, buttons, and every time we do append, we're injecting that letter into that div. Make sense? It does when you break it down. It's just hard to remember all the steps, right?
Yeah, because it's like if I was gonna do something else, I know what I have to do. That would make sense afterwards. It's like I don't know what to type in.
Yeah. Hey, Matt. It might be a good idea if you sit on the other side of Jesse, so Jesse can help you too, because we're having trouble getting to everyone. So maybe if you or maybe Trevor and Jesse switch, I don't know. So you guys can both sit on each side of him, and he can help you. They're all pretty lost. Can you go sit with Jose? With the red computer. Okay, so I know not everyone's ready, but we're gonna go over step 2 together so that we can get started on step 3, okay? Alright. And those of you that are further along, that have finished, I'm going to ask that you help us try to cover the rest of the class, because I want everyone to finish this. Okay? And I want everyone to be able to at least go through it, even if they don't totally understand it. Okay, so task number 2. We need to create an on-click event attached to the letter button. So we always start with our $. jQuery starts with the $, right? So Heather, if we start with the $, we start with our parentheses, we need to select all of the letter button classes. How would I do that in CSS? How would I create a letter button class? Dot? Nice, that's exactly right. And then we need a click handler, right? Which is dot on. Nice. And is that all we need for the click handler? Awesome. Yeah, okay, so now we have our click handler for our letter buttons, right? Now, what's nice about jQuery that we don't get with JavaScript is because we're selecting by class, immediately by writing this code, we've selected all 27 of those buttons. Like, we've got them all. We have one click handler that works for all of them, which is nice. And that's why we had to have that data attribute. We'll see in a little bit. So anyway, the next thing is create a variable called fridge magnet. Fridge magnet. And then we need to create a new div. So, Jay asked a good question about why jQuery is the way it is. So when we create something in jQuery, remember, we start with a $sign. We have some parentheses. We're doing everything like we normally do. We got the quotes, but then we do the angle brackets around the tag we want to create. I have no idea why jQuery chose to use this syntax to create something. I don't know. I can't tell you, but that's just the way it works. Remember, it's equivalent to this. That's the JavaScript alternative. Document.createElement, which may make more sense if you read it, right? Okay, we're creating an element of div, but it's more typey. So jQuery does it the jQuery way. It is what it is. Okay, then chain the following code into the fridge magnet variable. So it doesn't explain a lot of it, and that's okay. But if we take fridge magnet, and we need to chain it, so .text, $this, .attr, data, oops, dash letter. Can anyone explain this code? What's going on right here? Rolando or Jesse or Matt? Who's going to duke it out?
We'll let Matt go first.
You can explain it, Matt?
Are you just applying a text to the data letter?
We're applying text to the fridge magnet, right? And Jesse, how do we get the text?
We're actually pulling the attribute data letter from the button to actually do what letter text is needed.
Exactly. So this letter button selector selects all of the elements on the page with the letter button class. And remember, when up above here in that for loop, when we create those letter buttons, we added the data letter attribute of whatever letter we were at in the for loop. Okay, so the A button is going to have the A letter in data letter. We're literally using the this keyword, able to take that data letter attribute and pull the letter out and put it into the magnet's text. So we've not talked about this, but in the context of this button click, it's saying the button we are clicking, this button. I'm going to use jQuery with the good old $sign parentheses, and I'm going to pull an attribute off of that button. And that button is the data letter that we added earlier, okay? I know that's not super intuitive. It's really, really not. But we'll start using this a little bit more, and I can explain it a little bit deeper as I'm walking around for the next section. Okay. So, give each fridge magnet the following classes. So we did this. We used the add class, right? You scroll up, you'll see we did a very similar thing. We'll call them letters and fridge color, right? Then chain, oh, I read those out of order. That's okay, doesn't matter. Lastly, append the fridge magnet variable to the display div provided. So again, we got our $sign. We need to select by ID, display, and then we append our fridge magnet. So open it up, make sure we don't got any errors in our console. Nothing, good, okay. Boom. So, for those of you who did this earlier or who want to look at it more, if you finish number 3, go add some console logs, start console logging this stuff out and see what's up. Rolando? You can use append to, and it'd be fridge magnet.append to display, right? So you'd reverse the order because it's how you read it. So I'm appending a fridge magnet to the display, but I can take the fridge magnet and append it to the display. So it's backwards. Heather, yeah?
What would make the letter not show up? You get kill the lock
Your letters aren't showing up? Okay. I would. They would show up, but they're not clearing. They're not going to clear yet because we haven't done the clear. It's possible that the letters aren't in the data attributes. So go ahead and start on section 3, which is where we do the clear. Okay? So that's section 2. Let's start on section 3. I want everyone to finish this. We'll give it another 5 minutes. We'll talk about it a little bit more, and we'll take a break. We've probably doubled the time we were supposed to do on this, but I want everyone to spend more time with jQuery because this seems to be the hardest thing we've done so far. And I want to give you all the opportunity to understand this better. So we're going to power through it. Did Jesse take care of you, Heather?
Yeah.
Nice.
It was your data.
Oh, is the .data one that I did first?
Yeah, when we did
Yeah.
I followed that.
Yep, that was my bad. I messed you up.
At least the box is a little different. I think we'll get some different.
You have a question, Rolando?
Yeah, more of like the discussion.
Okay.
What, like, I understand the difference between raw JavaScript and jQuery, but like, how often do you use raw JavaScript compared to just being, what, can you do everything that raw JavaScript does?
Yes.
Well, obviously,
You can do, I mean, there might be some granular things that aren't related to dominant relation. You can't do map random.
sure, right, of course.
But in terms of dominant relation, yeah. So why would you ever use raw JavaScript?
No, that's not my question. I know why we have to learn raw JavaScript. I'm just thinking of like in the future, when if I were to try to like write something up, was I just to evolve in jQuery?
A lot of times jQuery is totally interpretable because it's using frames like React. So you don't need jQuery, right? So like I never use jQuery. So all my tools handle all that stuff. But
This is all really fun.
yeah, but when I do
the back end.
when I do the front end,
We're definitely gonna get it. This one actually wasn't down this part. So I'm looking at it. Inside the arm. Yeah.
take the raw JavaScript, raw JavaScript.
Same problem. I understand why last time. It's just like I open it to a point where I want to see this all because it's so I'm just concerned about the JavaScript.
So the question is, jQuery is really driving for you. The question is, could you rewrite that function? If I said create function dot text, they would take into text and add it to dominant, raw JavaScript, write it. You can write it and get both.
That's what I think, like, writing the problem. Okay, so let's go to jQuery docs. jQuery docs. So I was just using that's what I'm worried about. And the docs are going to give you examples.
The good news is you're aware of the thing that
So we can target any order that we're at, right? So basically,
jQuery is
whatever we grab.
nothing with you that's good. I was having a time going back and forth.
Right, so what we end up doing is we grab
So
the
like, okay, I know that there's a depend function in jQury.
yeah, so
How can I write
whatever
my
you
own
whatever
function
parent element you're trying to
get something,
and this is just going to take all the transfer, all the HTML, and everything that's inside of it out of the function. So basically, yeah, so if you use document.empty, you're just going to clear everything out of the document. But if you use just like a tag, it's going to choose these like out of it, call it okay.
they're the hardest problem.
So it should work.
Exactly. So basically, depends on if you got everything right. Alright, so let's go back. Well, actually, no, let's go back to your, yeah, there we go. Let's go to your, light bulbs going on. Now, once you get a true right, so let's go back to your synthesize your code. Task or letter button class. So what I want you to do is again the general display dealer displayed on a panel. Save that. Yeah, so yeah, so let's go back to your code. So we know where the problem is now. For some reason, it's too big. What's happening is you're saying letter button dot on, right? And then we're calling this callback run. So for some reason, it's not, when you're clicking, it's not actually happening, right? So let's see. Oh, there you go.
Look at that.
That's how you console log out. You say, where did it stop? Where did it break?
Clear button. I see how the letter buttons are populated. Because there's
You're not going to use Lockly, you're going to use hashtag.
Now you're trying to get your
Yeah, I have to see that on.
We're trying to figure out where they're going now. Find all that stuff out.
Yeah, we're gonna just cover it real quick and then break. All right, we're gonna do task number 3 really quick, because we are running out of time. So we need to get the clear button. It has an ID of clear, so we just select it with our pound sign, clear, right in our jQuery selectors. We got to give it a click. On click. Function. Don't forget to have your closing parenthesis. And remember, function happens inside the .on function. It's not outside of it, not before it, not after it, anything like that. It's inside of that .on function, okay? Use the jQuery empty method to clear the contents of display. Again, we need to select display as we do a jQuery, right? Because it's got an ID. Empty. Go ahead, pull it up. Hit a bunch of text. Hit clear. Voila, we're done. Alright, I know that was quick. Here's the code again. Take a 15-minute break. Let's come back at 8:45. I want to give you a break, even though we're late on time, just so everyone can decompress for a moment, because that was a lot. Stephanie, if you haven't already, slack out the full solution for him. Thanks for the help, man. I don't know, but if you find there's a thermostat, if you want to turn it up a little bit, feel free.
Usually it works really well. Almost every night I've come here,
When it's cold?
like when it's really, really cold, my legs start hurting like crazy. I'm pulling out my controller. Why isn't it not working? Usually it's because it dies when I go like this. I'm like, oh, it's working.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah.
I think it's just the cold. It just makes everything.
This loop right here, which just basically makes a hyphen for every letter in the array. So, oh man, and then so it makes a hyphen, but it actually is creating its own element, it's creating a span. So it's like every one of these is actually different span. Yeah. Because with the other part of my code, they need to have the own ID sort of. So if I like push F or physical, yeah, we actually did do congregate. I'm just trying to put a random one there, but basically it checks. I push it'll check all of them to see if it's supposed to be T, and then it just makes the ones that it's supposed to be. Yeah, so when you do it, what does it do? It works, but the only thing that I'm trying to do is just make it. I have really classic left variable for some of these are where are you calling? Like you need to have a guesses left minus somewhere. Yeah. But that's why you're not even calling that. Oh yeah, it was right there. So it's yes. I was just see if I could like I was like, okay, so the color of the text is white whenever I guess it. So I'm like, maybe I can just check if it's wrong by doing things. But I don't know how else I can do that. Because ours are like fundamentally like a lot different. Because mine is fundamentally they're the same. It's just really different. Yeah.
At least try to finagle your way through, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you don't sit here and do your head against the wall.
Yeah, spin your wheels just thinking about how this even works.
I don't understand how to do this, but at least I have a reference. If I wanted to do it, come back and try to figure it out.
Right.
So basically, you have does you know VS Code lets you debug your JavaScript in VS Code?
Yeah.
That like I use other compilers and that's really helpful when trying to figure out like the logic behind the stuff that you're trying to write.
Right. It does a lot for you. It's really nice. I don't know. Does it work on the UI stuff? I use it for Node, but
I don't necessarily want it for the UI stuff. I just want to see like I have these functions I want to like put a breakpoint and run it through it and see how it.
You can do that in the DevTools. DevTools? Yeah. So I'll show you real quick. Okay, so you're in the DevTools. We've got this open. You're like, okay, cool. You can go to sources. This panel right here. if you hit your fridge HTML, you can actually scroll down and find the JavaScript. If I refresh, it's going to run the code. And it's broken there at that breakpoint. Yep, sources on the left-hand side, there's a little arrow, it might be collapsed. You can find your HTML page, you can scroll down to the JavaScript, you can click on the number of the line that you want to stop on. If you refresh your page, and it's like the for loop, right, when it's building it, you can stop there. You can also set a breakpoint inside like a click. So this breakpoint is in the for loop. I can just watch what's happening, right? I can see the letter button changing and stuff like that. I can watch the for loop go again. I can watch this all 27 times or whatever. But then, I go ahead and I continue, F8. You notice I still have a breakpoint in the click, right? So if I click, boom, I can see what's happening in the click now. So it created a fridge magnet. I can see what this is. Holy crap, what is that? I can see all the attributes on it. Stuff like that. So you can go to attributes and you can start looking. Here's data letter. Inside this attribute, it has a queue, right? So you can inspect all this stuff and kind of see what's going on. It's very, very helpful.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for.
Stephanie, could you also Slack out the solution to number 12, the crystal example? Yeah. And just say, this is solution number 12 or something. I don't know. I don't know how you're slacking it out. Are there? Oh, God. Are they all in the solution? They have like step-by-step solution. Okay. Maybe, is it in the GitLab repo already? Oh, nice, yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's cool. I'll just Slack then. Yeah, I'll do that.
I have this letter guess part in it until you actually guess it. Yeah, and then as you guess it, I show it now, right? And then I go, if my remaining guessing is greater than 0, do this. So,
And so somebody sends us like,
Oh yeah, if you do the pound sign and then the channel name, you can send it to them and they can click it and get to it. Because none of these are private, so. If he sent you one, you should see a link to it somewhere, or you should see the channel somewhere in your list.
Who was this guy? I think he did leave it on time. Yeah, rocket face, dude. It's like right here. It's pretty sick. Yeah, looking for like ranch soda or dirt soda. Ranch soda. Yeah, I got it. It's terrible.
I'm basically like out of town.
Yeah, I told Spencer the same thing. I've spent
I'm still running on fumes now.
typos like that.
Yeah.
And usually going,
Yep. I do it all the time too. Sometimes a fresh pair of eyes is all you need.
and then you realize, oh wait a minute, I'm not doing an array. I'm doing
This thing's crazy.
We really big conferences back in March. And bought like a seafood tower. And it was like a couple grand.
Yeah. Oh, gee.
Had that company credit card. I was like, whatever, put it out there.
All right. Everyone back? Okay. All right. I know that last exercise was intense, and it was long and it was difficult, but I'm really proud of how everyone pushed through and how hard it was, but we all kept our resolve and no one went crazy, right? So you should all feel good about what we just did, even if you were confused and frustrated the whole time, because you did learn a lot, trust me, and you probably got a lot better. I mean, Heather, you may not feel like it, but you answered when I was asking you step 2, you got almost all of it. So, like, you're getting it, it's just, it's hard, right? You know? So, awesome work. Fist of 5, how's everyone feeling about jQuery now? We just did that example. You're 1 from a 2? Nice, it's progress. That's all we want, is a small bump. Awesome. That is fantastic. That everyone feeling a little bit more confident. So we're going to change gears for the rest of class. No more jQuery this class. We're done.
Even harder.
There's some other exercises we'll slack out at the end of class that you can do at home to give you a bit more experience, but we're going to talk about something totally different. We're going to go a bit more into the theory behind JavaScript and how it works. So for those of you really interested in programming languages and like the dirty bits of programming, this will probably be really interesting. For those of you who are like, I just want to make web pages, it's probably going to be super boring. Just going to let you know. It's also a difficult topic to wrap your head around. But that's okay. Again, it's another thing that we'll get. And you've seen a lot of what we're about to cover in practice, but you may not totally understand why it works the way it does. So we're going to talk about scoping. And scoping is something in every programming language has. And the easiest way to understand what scoping means is with those curly braces. So whenever you see a set of curly braces like this, you're entering a block, is what it's called. And every block in JavaScript and in very many languages has its own scope. You can imagine this is a box. And inside those curly braces is the inside of the box. And everything you put in that box can be found in that box. You can, you know, dig through it and find it, but outside of the box, you have no idea what's in there. You know, you can't, if a toy is inside of a box, you can't play with it from outside of the box, right? You have to be in the box to play with it. It's the best kind of analogy I can give, and it's not a very good one, but it is what it is. And when I say, you know, you've got stuff in the box, I'm talking about things like variables. So this variable is in its own scope, okay? It's surrounded by a random set of curly braces that do nothing, but you can imagine this is a function, this is an if statement, it's a for loop. Anything that has those curly braces follows these rules. And I'll show you that in a moment. So right here, I'm going to define variable y, hello, okay? So the other thing to note is the raw file has its own scope as well. It's called the global scope. And I'll show you the difference right here. If I console log y, everyone will be happy. If I console log x, maybe not so much. Oh, Jesus. Okay. There's a reason why that happens, and it's because of JavaScript. It's because JavaScript is terrible. But anyway.
I agree.
Let's learn about it.
You'll see that I have hello is hello is printing and 10 is printing. I'll explain that in a moment. Print x. I'm going to call this print x. Okay.
Well, technically, wouldn't it not define that variable as a function variable?
In this one, yes. In this case, it's exactly right. It won't define the variable until the function is run.
So, but if it's a scoping, even if you run the function, technically that variable is only good in that function. Is that right?
Yes. So I reran it. Okay. So the last example was too loose, and JavaScript has special rules about scoping that make it terrible. But here's a better example. We have a function, print x, okay? And it's going to say x is, and then it's going to print x. Now, print x, our function, is its own box. And as Peyton was saying, x isn't defined until print x is called, right? Because it's a function. But even if I wanted to then use x after the function, I can't, because the scope is gone. It's been destroyed. X does not exist outside of that function because that function has its own very clearly defined scope. So even if I run here, I'll get x is 10. Clearly x existed at some point, but then when I try to reference it later, I get an error. I get that red error. However, if I'm inside the function, what's going to happen now? It'll work. Yeah, it sure does. And this is a good example of how scopes encompass each other. So you can imagine a JavaScript file, a single file, has a scope. Okay, let's just say it has one scope. Technically, every file at the root level shares the same scope, but let's just say this file as a whole has one scope. And inside of there is a box print x. Now, y is something that's in this room, okay? And print x is a box that's on the desk. Technically, inside the box, we somehow have magical access to whatever's in the room as well, right? So this isn't a very good analogy because, you know, physically you don't actually. But what was that?
The box is made out of one-way mirror.
The box is made out of a one-way mirror?
You can see out of it, but you
Ah.
can't see into it.
Yeah, okay. That's a good way to phrase it. So you can see out of the box, but you can't necessarily see in, right? So all of the stuff outside of printx can't see into printx, but printx can take anything that exists outside of it and use it. And we've seen this with function calls. Functions work the same way. If I have a function, can these functions call each other? Yeah, they sure can. The reason why they can call each other is because they both exist in the same scope. They both are defined in the global scope. However, if I were to define test inside of printx, I could not call test anywhere else. Because then test only belongs in the printx scope. So you can see here, test is not defined. All right? So let's take something that's a little bit easier to understand, and that's a for loop. For loops follow these same rules because, like I said, everything that has these curly braces follows similar rules. So this time, x prints, the functions are, I should probably just use the slides because I don't even know what they're trying to explain here with scoping. It's super hard to understand. When we have these curly braces, and it defines the scope, JavaScript has a special rule that basically says, doesn't matter where you define something, you can use it wherever you want. So it kind of ruins this whole explanation. But theoretically, you shouldn't be able to use it, right? Anyway, test though, if I try to call test outside of the function,
It's not inside of a function. For is not a function.
for is not a function, but due to scope hoisting, it doesn't matter what you call. Really, only functions are the only way to define proper scope in JavaScript, and it sucks because it can't give a clear definition of what's going on. I'm going to circumvent some rules because I want you guys to understand how scope works. There's another keyword you can call called let, okay? And let's just like var, except let obeys the sanity rules of scoping that var doesn't, because var is literally the most asshole thing anyone could ever program into a language.
So let is the best way to go. It seemed like let pops up in my...
Let is a much better way to go because it obeys scoping, and you won't run into weird problems. Like you notice now in the last example, I had var x equals 10, okay? Actually, not even that. Even worse. Let's console log x. Or actually, I need to var x equals 10. So this should explode because x is undefined in the beginning, right? But it doesn't care. It just prints undefined. You can see right here, I'm declaring var x equal to 10 inside the for loop. And then I'm adding it up. 10 plus, you know, whatever I is, so starts at 0 all the way up to 9. And then I can console log x magically outside of the for loop. However, scoping rules make it so anything inside their own curly braces cannot be accessed outside of them. If I change this to let, which obeys proper scoping rules, then I get an error.
Why is your console log logging like from 10 to 19 rather than just 0 to 9?
Because I'm doing x plus I. This is to show that like it's going to change every time because I changes. So I starts at 0, x plus I is 10. I starts at R is 1, x plus, right? And then this shows that 10, when I was using var, would just magically be accessible outside of the for loop. When the reality is, when I define a variable inside of a scope, in theory, that variable should not be accessible outside of the scope. So it worked that way with functions because functions have an extremely concrete scope that even crazy JavaScript variables can't escape. However, because of how terrible JavaScript really is, var is magic and can do whatever it wants, right? The point is, that I'm trying to get to, scoping, yeah?
Use let instead. Just to become more of a brain.
You should use let, but you could,
Until you know what the hell you're doing.
yeah,
You notice the snippet comes up with let, and you have to change it to var.
the snippet comes up with let because it's best practice to use let. But everyone started with var because JavaScript only had var. So you can see here this little example they give. Setting var x equals 5, right there. And then here's a good example of scoping. You can go ahead and force an if statement where the scope is changing the value of x. But if we console log it out, it'll still come out as 5. So this is where scoping rules kind of apply. So I can actually do var x equals 1000. And then in here, I should be able to do x equals I. Literally didn't even follow the same rules. Shit, I don't know jack about scoping with var. Let's see what this does. I don't even know what their example is trying to say because it's completely wrong. Based off of what I just did. This isn't even true. So anyway, either my Google Chrome is smarter than this, or it doesn't work that way anymore. And the reason is, they added these let keywords in to actually teach you about scoping. So I'm going to go through the diagrams because literally nothing I have said has made any sense to anyone yet, because the var keyword is so hard to actually see scopes with that you can't even explain them other than by using functions. Does everyone understand when I said if I declare var x equals something inside of a function that it was not accessible outside of the function? That part makes sense, right? It's inside this concrete function. You can't take it out. The other stuff, ignore it. It doesn't make any sense in JavaScript, and literally you're just going to get yourself into trouble if you try to play with those rules. Like I just did 5 times in a row trying to explain to you how it worked. Anyway, the analogy is still a box, right? So the one-way mirror is a good analogy because you can see out, I can see everything around me, but I can't see into it. So the function can theoretically see everything outside of it. So I could see y when I had y, and I could call y from the function that was declared, but I could not get x out of the function because that function is a black box, right? Everything that happens in it is just pure magic. But it can manipulate the environment around it. So when you define a function, or an inner function, or a more inner function, they're kind of nested, right? And we could do this all the way down in a chain, and the scoping rules would still, they'd still add up, right? So we'd still have, you know, function A declares x, or something along those lines. I'll show you. We'll type it out instead of trying to just ambiguously talk about it. So we have function A, okay? And it defines y equal to 1. And then we have function B, defines z equal to 2. And then, through the power of JavaScript, we have function C, which does q, because why not, equal to 3. Right here, if I were to console log z, what would I get? 2? Undefined? Maybe? What was that? C can see inside of C. C can see inside of B because it is inside of B. C can see inside of A because it's inside of B, which is inside of C, right? But B cannot see inside of C. And A cannot see inside of B, and the rest of the world cannot see inside of A. So basically, there's this nested hierarchy of this. The child that's deepest within this hierarchy of scope can see everything the parents do, but the parents can't see what the child does. So I guess that's good if you're the kid. This is a very ambiguous topic. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around in JavaScript, especially because it doesn't make any sense in JavaScript. Literally, it's the biggest problem with JavaScript. I mean, there's several big problems, but this is definitely one of the big ones. Is how scoping works, and it just does whatever. For those who have programmed in other languages, JavaScript seemingly behaves in unpredictable ways, and that's why they came up with the let in the some other keywords too. So yes, you can use let, and you can use let in place of var everywhere. It'll obey scoping rules, which means if you're expecting var to work, you're going to see some unintended consequences, right? So here's some nested function examples, right? Can we see z outside of this nested function? And the answer is no. As we saw with our child nested functions, you can't get those variables out of a function, but you can bring them in. Okay? We can bring them in, that's easy. We can't take anything out. It's against the rules. It's like a safe. Once it's in there, you can't get it out again. Let's show an example then, since I've talked about let, of how let differs, before I just leave you hanging. So we have var x. Let's do an if statement. If true. So this is always going to execute, okay? Var x equals 10. If I console.log x, I should get 10. Let's do another if true. Let y equal 10. If I console.log y, I should get an error. And that's true. Because traditional scope says once you're inside of those curly braces, once you're inside of your own block, nothing should be able to escape. JavaScript thinks otherwise. So people were like, ooh, that was a bad idea, and they tried to fix it. So the var keyword is wacky. Literally does not care about your rules or your sanity, and it just kind of wants to hurt you. Let is a little bit more friendly. Okay, it actually obeys traditional scoping rules. So the idea of scope, it's a very ambiguous thing. It's very abstract, right? We can't, like, we can give it a concrete analogy, but it only goes so far because we really just have to play with it to understand what's happening.
So you're saying, like, it does its job as it'll give you the answer, but it'll also catch an error? Is that what you're saying? It's hard to tell because x and y are the same right now.
That's a, okay, let's distinguish. X, let's see, x in the if equals, and then we'll do plus x. And then this one will say x out of the if equals, and we'll give it plus x, okay? So let's set y equal to hello again. Hello. This should be a clearer example. Alright, so if we understand scoping rules, Jesse, what's going to print? Forget the this is the beginning one. Starting from the if true.
There's a scoping rules with the first part is going to print out the x is equal to x in the if is equal to 10.
Yep.
Outside is going to say x outside of the if is equal to 10.
Yep.
Then it's going to say y in the if equals hello.
Right.
And you're going to get an undefined for the last one.
So not defined throws an error. And they are different in JavaScript, yeah. There's an undefined value, there's a null value, again, weird JavaScript things. But yes, that's right. So x in the if is 10, magically through some weird scope destroying rules, x outside of the if is still 10. Y inside the if with our let keyword is hello, But because we use let and we're obeying the rules of scope inside of that if block, y does not exist outside of the if. It's now gone.
It's kind of like the triple equals versus the double equals.
It's one of those distinctions, right? The triple equals versus the double equals. The triple equals was a huge mistake. Basically, you'll see a pattern. JavaScript was a huge mistake. Kind of is what we get to, right? North, what's up? Like 1996. It was written in a week. So there's a lot of reasons why. I think so, yeah. I mean, that was not that long ago. Unless someone killed him who was doing this stuff. Why isn't this better? The JavaScript itself is a lot better. Like the let is fairly new. There's a lot of stuff that makes this a lot better that we're going to get to. Why is there not something better? Because this is so ubiquitous now. I should write mine? I will not know. Why didn't he fix it? Because he wrote it in a week. He just needed something that worked, and it did. It just didn't work very well for some things. But the thing is with JavaScript is it worked almost too well, and it was too easy to use. So then people started using it a lot. And then they said, well, now we're using it a lot, and this thing sucks. So then they started fixing it. And now everyone uses it, and they're trying to fix it, right? So it's like retrofitting the solution. So I know what I just went over is complicated. We're going to try to do a little exercise. It's number 13, lexical scope. Take some moments to just kind of play with it and see if you can understand what's going on. There's 2 of them. There's 3 exercises we're going to try to go over. We won't get to all of them. 13, 14, and 15. So in this one, you're supposed to look at the file, the HTML file, look at the scope, try to explain what's going to happen when you run this to someone near you, and then run it together and see if you were right. Sounds like the explanations are going well. I'm just kidding. Yanking your chain. Probably a mean thing to say.
I know, and I was like, this is like rocket science. And then looking back on it, I was like, can you go back? What? Yeah, they're like, hey dude, can you make a language for us? He's like, I mean,
pretty much. You gotta remember though, there was a lot less in JavaScript then than there is now.
True. Yeah. You like just not do anything for 10 days?
Oh, I guess because okay, because you're trying to make it one function. That's why. In the other function. Perfectly calling it inside of it.
What's funny is like, I don't know, really much of those actually make sense, right? Just a little bit.
It's good. I'll take it.
It's like, I mean, I kind of think about it the same way with like HTML. Like HTML tags, you know, and it's like nested.
Yeah.
It kind of feels like the same. It's kind of the same nested.
Similar, yeah.
It makes sense. You don't want certain functions to interact with each other.
So for this first example, I know I didn't give you a lot of time, but if we go ahead and look at it, you'll see that this outer function runs first, okay? So you can see after all these scopes have been defined and all the functions have been defined, it runs the outer function, which is going to return the inner function, actually. And then once we return the inner function, we'll run everything. We've defined z at this point. We've defined y. But if we go ahead and try to call z outside of the inner function, it doesn't work, right? Just like when we had the print x, we defined x inside of print x, and then we tried to call x later. It doesn't work. You can't take things out of functions. It's just not, doesn't work that way. Now you can return stuff from functions, sure. But you can't take it out of the function willingly or forcibly. Yeah.
So it's kind of like what you said, like a hierarchy, where it kind of goes from here to here to here.
Uh-huh.
It can't go up.
Yes, it can't go back up the hierarchy.
So like 30. Oh, you're good. So if it was, so it's the console dot log, then the x plus the x there, and then below that was the var x equals 5. They want to be able to define that, but the var y equals 5. Oh, sorry, x equals 5.
Okay, so if you did var x equals 5 right down here instead, what would happen? Something similar, but it's not quite the same as scope. This is more of just the order of operations.
Okay.
But if I do it, you'll see that x just comes back as undefined. Now the reason why this one comes back as undefined and not explode like z does, because shouldn't z come back as undefined, right? Is because x is still defined in this function, but because of weird rules in JavaScript, it's like, well, I know it's going to be defined. I know it's going to be used, but it's nothing yet, because I set it equal to 5 here. What was that?
How does it know the future?
That has to do with code compilation and how that works. But it doesn't, but it does. In the way JavaScript compiles this. But anyway, so that's a good point that you bring up. Is it a waterfall that always trickles down? In terms of scope, yes. In terms of code, not necessarily. However, if I bring in our friend let, it does what it's supposed to do, which is explode because x hasn't been anything yet. So in this case with let, yes, you're right. It flows all the way down, right? So if I try to do something with x before I've let x, then yeah, it will explode. We have a problem. But var is, again, a quirky little beast, and it does, I don't know, literally anything it wants. It's way too powerful, man. Which is a bad, bad, bad thing. Otherwise, so many people wouldn't have rushed to fix it 20 years later. Anyway, any questions on this scope example? Cool. There's another one, number 14. Do the same thing. Take a look at it, talk about it for a couple minutes, we'll discuss it. This one will probably throw you through a loop. This has very, very special rules in JavaScript and is also considered a nuisance. I'll talk about it in a moment. This represents... Yeah. Const is like let, except for you can't change the value. Yes. On what?
On the inner nest. How's it getting the DOM?
How's it getting the window?
Yeah.
I'll explain it in a moment. There's a reason why.
Because that's going all the way back to the main focus.
Yep. Yeah, it is. It's another oddity of JavaScript. JavaScript is a weird creature. Okay, so this one I imagine probably threw people through a loop because we haven't talked about objects at all. We haven't talked about this bindings and this scopings and how those work. And this is another thing in JavaScript that people consider a massive flaw in the language and how it works. Anyway, when you see curly braces like this, right? And then you see some value, colon, another value, right? So some string like name or something, colon, a value. So color's the name, colon, a value. This is an object. You can assign functions to objects, and they work in various ways. So this represents, God, I don't even want to talk about it because it's just going to skew the meaning of this. In this first function, this is the object, okay? So the function is part of the object. It is directly a value of the object. So this is this object, and we can see that because it's printed out, and we see the object, it literally says object, age 15, colored gray, name Gus. So this cat right here, boom, it's printed out. However, we have a nested function. This is where things get fun. We get inside the nested function. This is now the window, okay, and name is undefined, and age is undefined, and color is undefined. Well, name is blank, but color and age are undefined. That's really weird. Why will this print window? Well, this is another scoping issue, and a weird one at that. So the scope of this in this function belongs to the object. Because we're directly assigning this function to the object, this gets the scope of the object, right? However, this inner function is inside of the scope of the first function and is not attached to the object. So what it gets is the default this scope of a function in the browser. And the default this scope, this is the window, literally the browser window, and those properties, name, age, color, do not exist on the window. You can go ahead and look, open up this window object, and you will not see age. I don't see it, I see alert. A to B, application cache. I don't see color. There's cat, yeah. So, cat exists.
So you could do this dot cat age and you actually get it out.
Yep, sure can. And that is another thing to do scoping, because we define the cat variable inside of the window scope. The window automatically gets it. You can see how this is a black hole of rules and oddities that are particularly heinous in JavaScript. JavaScript is the prime offender of all the worst things you could possibly do when you're defining a language you want people to use a lot. It's the poster child of it. I don't expect this to make much sense, but does anyone have any questions on it that they'd like to ask?
So this is specifically referring to print info, right?
What was this? What was that?
This is specifically referring to print info or function?
Ah, this right here, this first one, is referring to cat.
The cat, okay.
This is referring to the window. And the reason why is because it's not attached to cat. So right here, we have this cat object. We're defining a property age of 15. So if I were to take the cat object and do print 15, or print the age, it would give me 15, right? If I were to do the cat object and print info, it'll give me this function. But this function is just assigned to some variable and then called later.
So this is just assigned to nested function, right?
Yeah, effectively.
Okay.
So remember how I said when you open up a JavaScript file and you said like var x equals 10, every function inside that JavaScript file could access x after that, right? We saw that. We could use x in every other function. We can't pull anything out of functions, but we can take x in. So this function right here doesn't belong to an object or anything like that. So this automatically gets the window, and the window is that global scope that everything belongs to in JavaScript. Yeah, Heather?
So, if you were, I don't know if can do this, but that's the function. If you write another object in there, is it intuitive enough to recognize that as the new this? No.
Nope. You would have to attach the function then to that object to make it this.
Oh, okay.
But I'll warn you, try not to think too hard about the this scoping, because this is notorious for being probably the hardest thing to understand in JavaScript, because people abuse it. Because you can actually change the this binding after you've used it to make it even worse. So this is, I'm very shocked actually to see this example, because I think it's a little too far from where we're at to really understand what's going on, because we don't know anything about this. We don't know anything about building objects, so it's kind of like we took a lot of concepts we don't know, and we're trying to explain them all at once, right? So I don't like it. So let's check out exercise 15, scope 3, talk about that one, see if it's any better, and see what we can figure out. And I implore you when you get home to check these out a bit more on your own. Yeah, so this one should be easier to understand because it doesn't add anything new. It's going to be harder to understand, though, because it's complicated, if that makes any sense. Come on. What's up, Matt?
So,
Can it still sync suspectedly not, so it goes one bottom of the, you can technically still see it, because the very top is the nested yet, right? It's not in that bracket, so you can still see it.
Yeah.
How that would work. Cool.
All right, so I know we didn't get a lot of time to look at this one and discuss it either, but let's talk about it. All right, so this one gets kind of complicated, which is good. We want to look at one that is better at showing us how scope works. So, var A, we're defining it at the global scope, right? We're defining it with the window and all that fun stuff. Function 1 is going to be called that it's just going to console log the value of A at that time. If we call it, what are we going to get? We're going to get 1. Does everyone get that? Why we got 1? Because 1 exists in the global scope in A, and we can go ahead and pull A into the 1 function all we want. Now, if A was defined in 1, we couldn't pull it out. So now we have 2 functions. We call them 2 top, right? We have a function and then a function defined in another function. In this inner function, we have a parameter A. And we're going to console log out A, and we're literally passing A into the 2 functions. So this one gets kind of confusing, because all of these variables have the same damn name. Right? What's going to print in this, though? 1, something unknown. Does anyone know? 1? 1? Yeah. So 1's going to print here because A at this point still equals 1. But when it is called into this function, we're taking the local scope of A and printing it. So I'm going to bring over this right here. So 1, we all said it was 1, correct? 2 is 1. And I'm going to change this in a little bit to show you how this works. So now we're redefining a as 5. And then we have this function 3 where we define it as 3. What's going to print in this 3 function? 3? Why? Because it's defined in the function, which is going to take precedence over this global one. Yep. Because when you redefine something inside of a function, the closest scope to it is the most important one. So in this case, A exists in both the 3 function scope and in the global scope. But the 3 function has its own scope, its own black box, and it's like I defined 3 in here. I'm going to use that 3 first because it's more important to me than my parents, right? If I like passed it into here or something? We'll take a look at it in a moment. So 3 prints 3. The last example, first, A is 5, second, A is 3, third prints A, and then second prints something, I don't know, and then we're going to print A again. What's going to print? There's going to be 2. There's going to be a 4 and a 5. What's going to print for 4? 3. What's going to print for 5? 4 prints 3, 5 prints 5. So some interesting examples. For this one, I want to show you the difference between the scopes. So we have A that we're defining is equal to 1. So I'm passing it in here. I'm passing in 1. But these are also called A. But these are the local scopes. So remember how I said in function 3, we have var A equals 3 that overrides A equals 5. It's also the case here that the local scope is going to override the global scope. So if I print 2, or put 2 into there instead of 1, 2 should now print 2. Because that local scope inside that function is more important. And even though it's a variable being passed in, it's got its own scope. So it doesn't care what the global A means anymore. So down here, the same thing would apply if I were to pass in A. So I could pass in A, and I could call this A, and this one's going to get really funky because it's going to override a bunch of stuff. Hold on. So in this case, 4 still prints, oh wait, sorry. 3 still prints 3 because it's redefining it with var A equals 3 inside the 3 function. Any questions on scope? I know scope's pretty wild. Most definitely. I'm sure we'll talk about it more on Saturday. You guys have me this Saturday. There's another exercise that we obviously didn't get to that the TAs will slack out with the solution. So if you want to do it at home, you can. You'll have the solution. You can compare. I recommend if there was confusing parts of today, you re-watch some of the video. Obviously, there's a big chunk of video where we were working on the exercise together, so you can kind of skip through that and find the solutions. Or you can find the solutions on Slack, because they've been slacked out too. If anyone has anything else they want to ask, feel free now. Hang out, we can talk. Otherwise, I'll see you on Saturday.
If variable is just outside the function,
Uh-huh.
you change that variable that you're given without passing it.
Okay, that's a good one. So can I change 3 right here, or A right here? So let's see what 4 prints. Still prints 3. So the redefining has, well, here you go. 5 though, now prints 3. So what I've done is I've changed the value of A. I'm not using var anymore, so the scope is now the same scope as in the first function. And I changed it when I called the second function, so it's been changed for good. So when I call alert 5, A has now been changed to 3. So the difference is, in the first one I have var A equals 3, I'm redefining A in a new scope. In the second scenario, I'm just reassigning A. So A still belongs to the same scope, but I'm changing it somewhere else. It was a good question. Anything else?
I kind of want to ask something. So do functions? Okay, let me think about how to ask this. So like, can two functions see the variables in each other if they're separate functions?
They cannot.
So they have their own scope.
Yep. So first cannot see the value of A in 3. They cannot see each other. So even if I called this X and I called this Z, I couldn't console log X. That is exactly what the hierarchy structure does, where I can never call something that isn't from its parent, right? So in the second function, I could call A equals 5 if I got rid of that A equals 3. I could still call A, but I couldn't call A out of the second function to the first function. So basically, that is still valid. I can still print A. I cannot print A inside this. Well, I can because it's defined in the global scope, but if this was X, I cannot print X up here anymore. Make sense?
Yeah.
You can't pull it out of a child.
That makes sense. So can you? I think you might have been talking about this before, but if you have two separate JavaScript files, does the global variable apply to both of them?
Yeah,
Oh.
it does.
I thought I remember you saying something about that.
Yeah, they all share the same global scope.
Oh, but like, what if you have them in like different directories?
Doesn't matter. If you include them all into the same HTML page, they affect each other. There's ways around that we'll discuss later. What's up, Jesse?
So